Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the 3D Printed Gamer, where we talk about things that sort of lie at the intersection of gaming and 3D printing. So I'm going to start off with this. Now I mentioned last episode, which was not last week, that the old Lulzbot Mini was going to get an enclosure, and it's there. And I've had some time to test it, and I thought I'd talk about it a little bit. And it'll serve as a review of the product itself to a certain extent, but also for the general concept of an enclosure, as a general concept. Anyway, so enclosure, why? Well, I like using ABS. ABS plastic is really easy to work with in terms of modeling. It glues really well. It acts a little bit more like your traditional plastic models when you're working with it, so it's kind of familiar. It prints faster, as a general rule, than PLA, which is kind of like the kind of starter plastic that everybody uses. It has its pluses and minuses, and one of the minuses is that it can be temperamental when it comes to temperature. So for example, if you're printing on a kind of regular warm day, you might not have any issues with it at all. But if you're printing, let's say you're doing a long print, and over the course of that day, the temperature drops, well, you might get something like this. And let's see if you can see what's going on here. Let's get a good, there you go. Nope, this side right here. You can kind of see that little crack there where you can see my glove through the black. Well, that is a layer that didn't quite adhere. There's that one. Yeah, there's one on either side. It's really hard to see because it's black. But the idea is that when your temperature changes, if it gets a little cooler, sometimes you have an issue where a layer won't adhere properly to the previous layer, and so it kind of peels up, and you get this sort of cracking effect. And this is one of the worst ones, but certainly not the only example of that. This has got that. And the problem is of course, there's a couple of problems with that. And one is, well, you got this big crack in there. And you could fill it unless it's, sitting inside some detail, and then it just becomes super problematic. And I don't know, maybe you can see that. No, maybe not. Maybe it's just too black. There, you can kind of see that there. Anyway, so you have these kind of imperfections that kind of create other imperfections, and it changes the height, and maybe you get some warping overall, and it's a real issue, and it can be very annoying, especially like something like this might take hours and hours to print. Well, not that many hours, but let's say 4 hours. Let's say it took 4 hours, and 3 hours into it you notice that it's not properly adhering to itself. Well, that can kind of be devastating. But if you can control that temperature and make it consistent throughout the whole print, then you should be able to eliminate those issues. And that is what the enclosures do, is that rather than having it completely open to the air, you're essentially locking in whatever temperature is in there as much as possible. And really in this case, because I have a heated bed, it's going to warm up a little bit over time to a certain extent, because that's going to act as a heater, and the enclosure is going to keep that heat in. And so the theory being that if you have it all enclosed like that, you are less likely to have those problems. And I'm not going to say those problems are necessarily eliminated, but they should be super rare. And my testing so far has proved that to definitely be the case. These are some pieces, and these are white, so you should be able to see it a little easier. These are some pieces that I've been working on for a building under construction, like a modern building under construction. And the original files come from Z1 Design, and we'll talk about them a little later. But as you can see, this is a fairly tall piece, tall, thin. I would expect to see problems with these. And every one of these that I've printed so far, and I have 5 of these taller pieces and a couple of these floor pieces, and not a single problem so far. I don't think those are the only things that I've printed. I know I've printed something else, but I don't seem to have it handy, so I can't show you. But the thing is, ever since I put the enclosure in, it has eliminated those issues for me. Not only that, I feel like I'm getting cleaner prints overall. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but that is certainly how it feels. It's certainly how it seems. So I really can't be any happier with the results. Now, before I did this, before I added this specific enclosure, I had experimented with just covering all the holes with cardboard. It was kind of a pain in the ass and super kludgy and not great. But I did notice improvement, so that was nice. So spending the money on this has felt like definitely worthwhile. Now this came, the tab synth enclosure came flat packed. This is all these pieces are laser cut, so it comes in a fairly, dense flat box, except for this door piece was already assembled with the hinges on and the latch on. And then, so it comes with a series of these little connector pieces. These are 3D printed pieces, and the acrylic, and that's it. The acrylic pieces are all sort of tab and slot, and there's a fair amount of kind of bending, and it's a little scary when you do it, but bending that you have to do to sort of make sure, because like you got 2 tabs here, 1 tab here, and so these kind of have to come up and over to fit into their slots, or this has to come up and over to fit into its slot, either way. But in any case, there is some kind of bending that needs to happen to make it all work. And there is some of the pieces, actually I think all of the pieces you have to be kind of careful about the orientation of them. Like this top piece, if you put it in the wrong way, then and it'll fit like 4 different ways, but if you have it in any of the 3 that don't work, then it's not going to feed your filament properly. But if you're just paying attention to everything and you watch the video, they have a good video. The printed instructions kind of suck, but mostly because it's easier to watch the video. And so if you've watched the video and you look at the printed instructions, you're like, I don't need the printed instructions, I'll just look at the video. The printed instructions are good for just making sure you have the right parts at the right time. So the one thing that I was a little concerned about when I was putting this together was this little door seems like it's actually not that useful, because most of the time when I'm done with a print, whatever is on here, and it's going to take a little work to get it out. So unless it's fairly small, I need to have room to work my little spatula in there. And this little door isn't really doing it for me. But the way this is all set up, there's just these little clips here, and you can just slide them up, and then this whole front piece comes off, and you've got your whole thing to work with again. And when you're done, of course, now this seems like more work than it actually is because I'm trying to do it on camera, but it's really not that. There we go. That slides down, that slides down, and it's back on, and you're ready to go. So I've been really happy. Like every one of the pieces that surround this thing come off and on just that easily. And I know that made it look harder than it is, and it's not hard. They all have two of the clips that just slide up. You lift it out, so if you need to access any part of it, you can do that very easily. And you can disassemble the whole thing in under a minute. So if for whatever reason, maybe you need to move the printer somewhere else and you don't want to worry about, you know, scratching into the pieces, then you could easily disassemble it quickly. So in general, been super happy with the enclosure doing what it's supposed to do, and B, very happy with this specific enclosure and how it went together and how it works. I really couldn't be happier. So anyway, if you happen to have this particular printer, the Lulzbot Mini, and you're thinking about getting an enclosure, I'll include a link below. You actually can, I think you can only buy these on Amazon right now. They don't actually have their own store. I have a feeling it's sort of a garage operation that these come out of, which is perfectly fine. So yeah, so that's it for the enclosure. So a little while back I mentioned Z1 Design and the building that I'm working on. And I've actually been meaning to talk about Z1 for a while. They had their Precinct 187 Kickstarter. How long ago was that? So it finished up in November, and ever since then, they've been releasing all of the files for it, you know, a little at a time, certainly not all at once. These are really some of the best terrain, 3D printed terrain files I've seen. If I kind of wish they were just a store, they would be giving printablescenery.com a real run for their money, I think. Now, most of the stuff they have right now, or most of the stuff for the Kickstarter, was what you might consider modern. Well, actually, it is modern, really, but the whole Kickstarter, even though it's called Precinct 187, which makes you think it was just a single, you know, like a police building or something, what it really was is a series of modern buildings that really represent kind of metropolitan city style buildings, mostly within New York flair, maybe a little Chicago and a little Los Angeles thrown in for good measure. A lot of the stuff feels like maybe buildings from the 20s or 30s, so you might be able to put them into, you know, like a gangster skirmish game or something. But those buildings are also, you know, currently exist in modern day, so they could go with anything. A lot of them would work as sort of like, you know, a Gotham City style board, or even any kind of modern city, you know, if you're doing zombie apocalypse or what have you. But the stuff is great, and it covers a really wide range of specific styles of buildings. You've got, you know, you've got brownstones, you've got a police precinct building, you've got the there's some mall buildings, of course the building under construction. There are a bank, a hotel, prison. I mean, there's just so many things. The funny thing about this, you know, I'm getting all of these things and I don't have a particular use for them right now. This is why I'm doing the building under construction, because it seems like the most easy to kind of plug into either modern or sci-fi or whatever. The final result of this looks a little bit like something I've seen in the XCOM video games, which is another reason I decided to do it, just because it was so reminiscent of that. But they all look so good. I want to find a use for them, personal use for them. It's not like there aren't any games out there that I could be using these for. It's just I'm not playing those games at the moment, which is really like, to be driven to game in a certain period because you like the terrain seems a little weird to me. But that is kind of where I am. It's like, how can what game do I really want to play where I can use these? But here's the thing. So the reason I haven't mentioned it up to this point was because the Kickstarter is long over, and I don't like talking about Kickstarters if you can't participate in them at the time. But the thing is, it is possible to get involved as sort of a late pledge still. So in a way, it's sort of like you're just buying them, like it's just a store, but they don't really have a store set up. I'll provide you a link where you can go to their webpage, and that provides information about how to get involved in this. Were you to jump in, there is just a lot of stuff that you can be printing. You might also want to go to their Facebook page, the Z1 Design 3D printing page. Again, I'll see if I can remember to provide a link. Where you can see where people have actually been printing and painting and finishing up and, like building entire boards using this material, and it is pretty amazing. So something to take a look at. All right, before we go, I wanted to share one more thing that I printed that I totally forgot about earlier. This is a box for X-Wing. This is hold your counters and your cards, your damage deck, but also when it's out on the table, these slots will hold all of your movement templates. And this is something I was told about by my brother-in-law, who just got into X-Wing, and I had mentioned that there were boxes available on Thingiverse, and so he looked this one up and asked if I could print it for him, and I did. Now again, this is another one that I don't think I would have gotten as good a luck prior to the enclosure, but look at this lid. Oh yeah, look at how nice that is. Again, I'll provide a link in the description. And this is amazing. This is really good. I think if I was going to redo this design, I would make the part that's holding the lid on just a hair thicker, a little wider at the wall there. Just because, as is, I can see that, there's going to want to be some layer separation there, but otherwise, this is such a cool box. And I wish I had something other than white to print it in. But that's all I had loaded up, so. So again, I'll provide a link in the description, and you can print one of these for yourself. Look at that. That is so cool. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. I think we've covered enough this time around. And if you have any questions or have any specific things you'd like to see me cover in the future, let me know in the comments, and I would be happy to explore those questions for you. But that's going to do it for now. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.